Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Pro Tools, Kickin your mix with Sidechains. We're so happy to have with us Andy Hagerman on today's session. So let's just quickly get to the housekeeping items here. As most of you know, if you're following us on Zoom, the webinar is being recorded and your audio is muted. Feel free to ask questions, though. Get those in the questions field, and we'll get those out to Andy at the end of the session. These will be posted back to avid.com. If you're following us on the social feeds, hey, give us a shout out. Let us know where you're watching us from. I know Andy has such a following all over the world. And thank you for those of you that are staying up late or getting up early for this session with Andy today. Again, with Andy Hagerman, our Avid Master Instructor, who is currently residing in Tokyo. And I know you have a bit here to cover, Andy, so I will go ahead and hand the reins over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me share my screen here. So you should now be seeing my screen. Are you not?
I'm seeing it. You're good.
Excellent. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about something that, and I'm going to start off that I get a little bit persnickety with because we don't use the right names, and sometimes that can lead to problems. But what we're going to be talking about is colloquially referred to as sidechains. And let me set the stage for you guys before we get into the actual technique of it. Let me set the stage of what is happening from a signal flow perspective. So here's the signal flow diagram for a normal compressor. Now, a compressor has its input. Now, usually that input is from the track that the compressor plug is on. So in other words, it's, a kick or snare or bass or whatever. Now, that signal is split, and a copy of that is sent to a thing called the sidechain. All compressors all the time have a sidechain, and the sidechain is a little something that listens to that signal, and then it controls how another thing called the attenuator, which is the thing that pushes down on the audio and does the actual compression. The sidechain determines how that will act. So the sidechain has the threshold data, the ratio, attack, release, knee, all of that stuff. That's the job of the sidechain, which controls the attenuator. So again, and this is the beef that I have a little bit, is that we use the term sidechain as if it was a special thing. All compressors, all expanders, all the time have a sidechain. Now, sometimes those sidechain controls are accessible. And so if you see a sidechain control, like this is the sidechain controls in, I believe, the Compressor 3, you can choose how you want to work with that sidechain. In fact, you have some control over a low pass filter here, or sorry, a low cut filter here, or a high cut filter here, and you can actually choose to filter the original signals before it hits the sidechain. And this is something mastering engineers do. So they might filter out the low frequencies to keep it from pumping, to give it a nice, even compression, for mastering or whatever. But that's a sidechain control. Now, what we normally in the industry refer to, and I'll refer to it myself as sidechaining, is actually something different. It's a thing called a key input. Okay, so the key input, you can enable that key input by clicking, usually on the sidechain, some button. In this case, it's a little blue button that says it has a key on it, icon on it. And then from a signal flow perspective, what's happening is this, is that instead of the input coming from the compressor controlling the sidechain, it's the input from somewhere else. So what we do is we have, let's say, a kick drum, which is what I'll show you guys in just a few minutes. You can have a kick drum that is sending a signal through a key input, and that key input then is controlling the sidechain, which in turn controls the attenuator and then brings that, brings the compression down and does all the stuff that a compressor normally does. So again, I'm off my soapbox now. All compressors, all expanders have sidechains. Sometimes those sidechains controls are accessible by the end user. Sometimes they're not. And if they are accessible, they usually have the ability for a person to choose a key input to control that sidechain. Now, what do we use sidechains for? There's a couple of things. Okay, so when we're we're kind of bringing a signal down to make room for another signal, we used to call that ducking. So if you want to duck a music track, so in other words, you bring a music track down whenever there's dialogue, or whenever there's a lead vocal or something like that, the lead vocal or the dialogue would be the key input controlling a compressor that is on the music track, and then the music track is brought down whenever there's a signal on this key input track. Another one, ducking a bass track when the kick hits. So this is the eternal struggle between the bass guitar and a kick drum, which they occupy a lot of the same sonic space. And if you want to have the bass attenuated down when the kick drum hits, key inputs are a great way to do that, right? But you can go the other way. You could also use a key input with a thing called an expander or a gate, and you can actually use that to reinforce a sound. So if you wanted to take a kick drum and add like a really low a sine wave to it to give it a lot of weight, then a sidechain could be done with that. In electronic dance music, we do this all the time to create this kind of bouncy bass part or pad stuff, and I'll show you how to do that just now. And with all things music, these are just some traditional uses. I'm sure there's 20 others, and don't be limited by tradition. Whatever you can think of, as long as you understand the signal flow of it, have at it, Hoss. Go, have fun. Understanding what you're doing will enable you to do anything you can think of. So let's take a look at how this is done in Pro Tools. But first, Pro Tools 2021.6 introduced a new preference. And this preference is in the mixing tab of the preferences dialog box. And that is automatic delay compensation for sidechains. Now, it used to be that the only systems that we could have automatic delay compensation for sidechains were HDX systems. Now it's on all Pro Tools systems, so you just check that box. Now, you may be asking yourself, or you might be asking me, Andy, why would you ever not want to check that box? And the only answer I can really think of is this, is if you were using a project or a session that was done before this feature, then you may find that the timing is too abrupt, is too quick, because we now have delay compensation, and in the past you didn't, so you had to work with a system that didn't have delay compensation. So if you're working with an old session and you're not getting the results that you want, you can click this button to basically take this feature and turn it off, and that gives you basically what you were working with before 2021.6. For purposes of moving forward, I really can't think of a reason. I'm sure there's one, but I can't think of a reason not to have that particular preference enabled. And again, that's going to be in the mixing tab of the preferences dialog. All right, so that's the stage. The stage is set. You understand the signal flow, which is the most important thing. Now let's show how this is done. And it's super simple, right? If you understand the workflow or the signal flow behind it, it's super, super simple. So let's take a look inside of Pro Tools. All right, so I've got my session here. And just to let you know where that preference is, just to show it to you actually in the window, I'm going to go here to Setup. And I'm going to go into my preferences window, and in the mixing tab, it's right down here at the bottom. So there's your time mode is in samples usually, doesn't have to be, but that's usually the case. And you can activate or deactivate automatic delay compensation with the sidechains. You can deactivate that if you want here. And again, it's the mixing tab of the preferences window. Now, what I've got over here is a session, and this is all MIDI, super easy session. And let's take a look at each of these tracks individually. So I've got a pad track over here, and I'll go ahead and play this. Great. So I've got this kind of neat little pad kind of dancey thing. I've got, if I go to my bass, okay, so a little bit of contrary motion there. That's very, very musical. And then I've got a kick. This is expand. So it's just 4 on the floor. And then down here, I've got another little thing, and you're not going to hear anything right now. This is a signal generator. And if I turn off the the gate here, so here's my signal generator. If I turn off my gate, you'll hear just a low-pitched sine wave. If you don't hear it, that is probably that your system can't play that. And I'll be honest, with this, in a normal situation, I would have this pitch much, much lower. But for the purposes of playing over, internet-ish kind of playback systems, I'm not going to, just to demonstrate the topic. So those are my component tracks. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to show you what I've done with the kick track. So I'm going to go, I think probably the best place for me to go now is going to be into the mix when it's going to give me the most amount of space. And if you take a look at the kick track, I have a bypassed send, and that bypass send is a mono send. It's on a stereo track, but it's a mono send. Mono send is important. A sidechain input can only be mono. So using a stereo bus, a stereo sidechain won't be recognized by the recipient devices. So you want to make a mono one. And this is on a stereo track. It just sums it together. No problem. The other thing that I've done here, just because it's a little bit easier for me to work with, is I've specifically made this a pre-fader send. And the reason why I've done that is a pre-fader send won't mute itself if I mute the source track. Okay, so that's my side chain. Okay, and we'll take care of that in just a second. We'll leave that over here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my kick drum, and let me make sure I'm looping okay. Yep. And if I go here, there's my kick. It's doing its thing, right? Now, on the sub kick, what I have is a signal generator with that low sound. And what I want to do is I want to put that low sound and have that low sound play whenever the kick drum plays. Now, I'm not going to be using a compressor. I'm going to be using an expander. Now, an expander is the opposite of a compressor. It's the reverse of it. So when a signal goes above a threshold, then the gate will open, or the expander will open. And I've got this set up with the sidechain enabled, so you can see the little blue key there. That's my, sorry, I've got my key input. See, I did that. I said it wrong right off the bat. I got my key input enabled, and over here, right by this big key icon, I've chosen my key input source. Okay, and that key input source, I've just named it sidechain bus just to make sure that I remember, because I'm a forgetful person by nature. Now, here's what's going to happen: is if I go ahead and play, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute. You can see there's nothing happening in the expander right now, but as soon as I unmute this, you're going to see that this expander is now reacting to the other track. Now, I'm going to mute or unsolo. Now, this is why I'm going to stop playback. The reason why I have this as a pre-fader send is so that I can do exactly what I just did here, is I unsoloed this kick track so I can just hear what's going on with this particular expander. And you can hear what's going on. Again, in the real world, this would be a much, much lower ground shaking sound, just to give you that weight. But this is so you can hear it. Now, when it comes to being able to use this, the trick of this entire thing is, first of all, setting up the key input. Second thing is attack and release times. That's where all the magic is. And it's easy to do wrong. So one of the things I'll recommend is that don't make your attack time too short, because if your attack time is super short, then what you'll get is this. You're hearing that click. It's because the gate is opening up too quickly. And if you take that attack, just a little bit of space, and that clicking goes away. Now, the other thing is your release. You can make this a longer sound if you want, or you can make it nice and tight. Now, too short, and it kind of, you can see the door closing. But let's make that sound. I think I like that. Let's solo the kick. Now it's going to be a little bit. There we go. Now, again, it's super easy. And the whole trick to this was understanding the signal flow behind this and understanding your attack and release times, which we talked about in another live online learning. So between the two of these, you've got this already covered. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, so that's taken care of. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, and I'll mute my sidechain again, is I'm going to solo this bass part. And you'll see here I've got the sound source is Falcon, which is an instrument that is easy to love. And then I've got, instead of an expander, I've got a fairly aggressive compressor. Okay. Now this compressor, similarly, I'll go ahead and stop playback. This compressor similarly has a key input. It's the same exact key input source. So this expander and this compressor basically are getting their trigger signals from the same place. Now, they're going to do opposite things. The expander is going to open up when it gets that signal. The compressor is going to push down when it gets this signal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unmute my my send, remembering that it's a pre-fader send. And again, the faster attack, it sounds a little clicky. That's threshold, that's what I want. And you can go, the more your threshold goes down, the more it's going to go down to basically silence. And I want it to bounce more. See how that feels with the kick. Great. That's actually not too bad at all. And you can see how what's happening is, if I understand the function of my attack and release times, and I understand the signal flow, it's just a matter of tweaking out and getting it to where you're starting to groove. Again, stop. And the same thing can be said for the for this pad. So I've got a pad, and again, this is what it sounds like. Whoops. This is what it sounds like without. Sorry. And because I'm lazy, I'm going to get rid of this compressor, and I'm just going to hold the Option key and copy these settings right over. And let's see how that works for us. Now that gets a little bit too extreme for me, so what I am going to do, and what I did, I wanted to have the bass be a little bit more percussive than the pad, so I took my release and kind of evened it out. So the release is basically the time it takes for the compressor to stop compressing once the signal goes below the threshold. So I think that's going to work for me. There we go. Sounds a little bit more full. And let's hear what it sounds like together. And at that point, it's seasoned to taste. At that point, it's just basically getting the signals to the point where it's grooving. You can do this with anything, and it doesn't have to be as extreme as what I was doing right here. If you have arpeggiators that are doing their thing and you just want them to kind of duck down just a little bit, you could use the exact same logic. You just don't have to go as extreme. Again, and I know I've said this 15 times already, but that signal generator is usually going to be much, much, much lower, and it's going to give you that bass shaking, low sine wave. Why do I use a sine wave instead of another sound? Because a sine wave has no overtones. So it's power without penalty. So I can put a sine wave there. It's going to give me a lot of low frequencies, but it's not going to get in the way of all other things, other elements in my mix. And that is the mechanics and the practice of using sidechain inputs to either control a compressor or to control an expander. Dawn, were there any questions?
Let's see. If you do have questions, go ahead and enter them at this time. Although I got to say, Andy, before our next session, I really need a standing desk because regardless of what you're doing, I just want to dance. So I'll have a modification before our next session. So we'll just see. Let's see if we have any questions coming in. We do have a nice shout out to you for teaching the basics of mixing as an essential thing for bringing new generations to the platform. So thank you for the nice shout out there.
Thanks.
I'm looking around for questions. Let's see. Other just comments. You're amazing, Andy. Thank you for the sessions. So it looks like you've covered everything in great detail. I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Just a lot of hearts and a lot of shout outs to you, Andy, as usual. So it looks like, let me just do one more quick scan. I thought I seen something pop in, but nope, no questions at this time. So we're looking pretty good. It was a fun session though. Yes.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and take the screen back. You do have another minute to load a question if you like, and I will go ahead and get up our next sessions here. So let me get that screen up and take that from you. One moment. We'll see if any other questions come in as well. So we'll go ahead and share the screen. So as you see, our next two sessions coming up are Media Composer, Paint Effect with Mary Ann, and she's also covering advanced tracking tips. So look for those sessions. We will look to book a new session with Andy. If you do have topics for Andy that you'd like him to cover, let us know. Drop us an email at liveonlinelearning@avid.com. He's looking for some topics he hasn't covered yet. So drop us a note for that. And with that, Andy, I'll let you get to bed because I know it's really late there in Tokyo. So
it's a pleasure. I'm a night owl anyways.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for attending. And Andy, we'll see you later. Thanks.
Take it easy, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.